You're listening to Contesting Wrestling, Minisode 44. We are reflecting on a week that only had one episode featuring Professor Carrie Lynn Reinhardt, but 2 episodes inspired by her choices, where in our first one on Monday, we went through AEW Fyter Fest Night 2, talked about the things that AEW, what are they doing? What's going on? Why is Orange Cassidy so great? And then continued that discussion about how great he is, as well as our discussion of Lucha Underground, which, by a massive coincidence, Carrie Lynn Reinhardt was also a huge fan of.
One note on that premium episode. I got the dates of those Dynamite episodes completely wrong. The Orange Cassidy Jericho debate was on August 5th, and then the rematch, their second match, was on August 12th.
I gotta say, AEW's, like, the way that they handle the political influence, it's not political humor. It is sort of humor wearing the cloak of politics.
Yes.
It's really great, because we also watched, you guys had me watch a promo for this episode with a guy that I wasn't really familiar with, who I thought it was fucking great.
MJF, Maxwell Jacob Friedman. This is from the July 29th Dynamite, where he gave this great promo where he announced his candidacy for champion of AEW. And he really did a great job of, like, using language that you associate with American politics or the current political situation, but not in a way that made any kind of clear political statement, except as it regards AEW.
And, like, even, like, Jericho and Cassidy, like, you could vaguely map them onto a sort of a leftish, rightish kind of thing. It's definitely a generational struggle. To me, it really was like a Gen X millennial sort of struggle, but it also doesn't really play out that way. It's not an exact, like, one-to-one kind of thing.
The one thing MJF did that really did kind of identify him with Trump was the way he treated that woman who was attending to his microphone or whatever.
And, you know, I gotta say, I feel like society's come a long way, that a guy doing things that was fairly recently considered pretty normal, like, male behavior.
Telling a woman to smile and then it makes her prettier, yeah.
Like, the fact that that is now the behavior of a guy who you are supposed to hate more than anybody, that's pretty big.
Yeah.
You know, that's a big thing.
It's a good step for sure. MJF could be the guy. He's the best SEAL I've seen in years and years and years. He's not afraid of the heat. He's not afraid to actually get it.
Yeah.
I was really astonished the beginning of the clip, just hearing the, like, angry boil of the relatively small crowd.
Yeah, I mean, of course, they're wrestlers at this point, so they're going to react the way AEW wants them to react, more or less. But to your point, like, you don't hear that kind of vitriol at any other point because there isn't anything to hate that much. Because this art of being a genuine heel and actually being dislikable, as Doc was saying, is largely lost. There's very few wrestlers who are willing to be heels and not be cool at all, you know, and just be a fucking douchebag.
And to be fair, watching this, I'm going to watch more. Honestly, I have to admit, in another concession to the long-term game of this podcast, I might start watching AEW regularly because it's just great. I don't know, at least when I see the highlights, I think it's great. Maybe the lowlights will turn me off.
I mean, that's the thing. We show you the highlights. And for me, it's like MJF, Orange Cassidy, Jericho, when he's really on, are great. And I always want to see them. The vast majority of what's on AEW doesn't mean a lot to me. So, you know, watching week to week, I mean, we'll see how you react. But I have a feeling that you'll think similarly.
I like watching Dark because the stakes are lower and they know how to do that, as opposed to the stakes being lower and it making it seem meaningless. They're two different things.
But one of the great things about MJF's promo is that he calls out AEW with very real criticisms. You know, the idea that a lot of the wrestling just looks like gymnastics and doesn't actually look like they're having a real fight. The fact that they've all, you know, patted each other on the back and glad-handed about being this great alternative when they really do a lot of the same stupid shit that WWE does. Calling Jon Moxley a cosplayer Stone Cold Steve Austin gimmick was pretty fucked up, but true.
I felt like while he was doing that, I don't know if WWE does this, but it felt like, AEW was the first, like, major large-scale wrestling promotion where the writers are reading angry comments on Reddit in like the AEW Reddit forum, and they're just like, oh yeah, this is boom, that's all going in here. Every single drop of this is fucking going in here.
Exactly.
Like,
that's extremely true for better or worse. So on the one hand, yes, this is a great example of what you're talking about. On the other hand, I find AEW is a little bit too openly capitulating to their fans on Twitter. Like, people complain about shit and they actually post messages like, we hear you, we're gonna change things. It's like, don't say that shit. Just either change it or don't or whatever. But like, it's just pandering, you know?
That is ultimately, I mean, that is the thing that is terrible and wonderful about Twitter at the same time. Like, I've pretty much migrated off of Facebook at this point because I just can't like hear people I went to high school with spout fascism anymore. I'd rather watch a bunch of strangers spout fascism. So I've been on Twitter a lot more, and it really isn't remarkable how like people who with incredible power, who are like deeply respected and have like been doing whatever it is they do for decades, and they're just suddenly on Twitter now, they'll post something and then fucking like, you know, like Boner Hitler 69, whose avatar is like an anime cat girl, will be like, actually you should eat my whole dick. And then this person will be like, excuse me, I should not eat your whole dick. I won a Pulitzer, okay? I don't need to do, I'm going to write an angry article in the New York Times about how Boner Hitler told me to eat a whole dick.
Meanwhile, Boner Hitler has 25 followers, and the person he's insulting has 35,000. And it's the equivalent of going into a crowd to see the person and shouting that, and should be given about as much attention. But instead, they get the New York Times article. And now everybody knows who Boner Hitler is, and they actually have a voice. And that's the problem with Twitter.
But there's also, it is like a problem, and it's not good, but there is part of me that cannot help but also smile when like some like rich, you know, when some asshole has to come down off the mountain to be like, no, excuse me, Boner Hitler, that's very hurtful what you just said to me. And they have to take time out of their life that they spend like exploiting people's labor to feel bad. And like, I know that sounds really I don't know, there is something that is weirdly qualitative about that I can't help but appreciate.
And that's the double-edged sword of democratization, right? Everybody gets a say, which is good, but some of those says really fucking suck. You know?
Right. You know, there was the Twitter incident in AEW. So they came out with a service called AEW Heels. Which they completely botched rolling it out and what it is. You know, at first they present it, well, it's going to be a service for women wrestling fans, or it can be a safe space for them to talk. And then they were like, oh, but that's not what it is, though. It's a $50 a year fan club where there's going to be like weekly or monthly like Zoom meetings with the wrestlers and all of that, which I mean, fine, but say that in the first place.
And the fact that they call it heels, like, okay, I get the double entendre there, great. But for AEW to present themselves as like this progressive company, but then to like make wearing high heels like definitive of womanhood, it is really incongruous.
But past all that, Brandy Rhodes tried to defend it on Twitter because it was her project. And from all accounts, the first actual heels meeting was very successful. There are people who are interested in this service one way or another. But the Twitter backlash against her personally from wrestling fans that somehow also think she isn't entitled to be in the wrestling business, despite the fact that she's now been in the wrestling business for like 7 or 8 years, got to the point where she quit Twitter, to then have people make fun of her there, like, because she was saying, oh, I can take it. They can, you know, if people are going to troll me, I can take it. So they made fun of her from that, to which Cody had to go on Twitter and be like, yeah, we saw too many people calling her the N-word, so she canceled her Twitter account. Do you have a problem with that? Are you satisfied, everybody? It's like, that's the problem with Twitter. You take what could be a legitimate gripe, like things that Ben said, and go way too far with it. It becomes the angry mob, and most of that angry mob are just regular people sitting around looking at their phones. They're not even angry. They just type out, you know, screw you, and hit enter.
I will say, Brandy's doing a really good job of making herself an enormous heel.
Oh, when she finally decided a couple of weeks ago on the show, all right, if they're all going to hate me anyway, I'm just going to go with it. It's been great. They just put out their first action figure line, and it's only like 6 figures. It's the Bucks, Omega, Jericho, and Brandy, and Adam Page. It's like the elite and Brandy.
Brandy's the one woman that they put in the first line, yeah.
And now her character is she's carrying like 2 of her action figures with her and telling anybody that will listen on screen that she's the only woman with an action figure, which goes over great with like her tag team partner that didn't get an action figure. And I think it's been doing very well.
I will say,
that's
though,
a good
I think they might have missed the boat. They still have time to make up for it, but if they made Nyla Rose an action figure in their first line, she might be the first trans action figure ever, right? Like millions of people would want to buy that.
I'm sure they still will do a Nyla Rose figure at some point in the future.
We'll see.
I mean, why not,
Yeah, I mean, tons of people who aren't even wrestling fans would want to buy that, right?
Well, that depends on if they've heard of Nyla Rose or not. That's the thing. They've made action figures of the biggest stars in the company. Nyla Rose is great, and it's great, everything that she's done, but she's not nearly as big a star as Chris Jericho, and even Brandy was on WWE TV for a few years before AEW came up, and that's what they have to go for.
How does AEW do with kids? Any idea?
AEW skews younger, actually. It does well with the 18 to 35 demographic.
But what about little kids?
Yeah.
We're talking about action figures, so we're looking at guys in their 30s, and I'm not joking.
No, yeah, you are.
Those are the people
100%
currently camping out at Walmarts for the days these figures come in and buying out their inventory so that kids that might want them have not been getting them. And that's also not a joke. As far as how it does amongst little kids, I honestly don't know. I know it's hitting the big money demographic of young people that are adults, but I don't know how it does with little kids.
I think I'm going to start an outreach group where we find alienated nerds who are online to buy action figures in their mid-30s and give them psychedelic drugs.
Oh, man,
no, I am
idea.
of course joking. I mean, I'm not joking in the sense you should try some psychedelic drugs at some point. They're great, but also, buy action figures in your 30s. Who gives a shit?
At least.
Buy action figures as an adult. That's fine.
There's nothing wrong with buying action figures in the abstract, whatever age you are. Action figures are great. The problem just becomes the mania around it, because it's you want to get the whole set and then another set to keep and sell, and it's all of that is a bit much.
It's cool when you're older, because when you pretend to make them have sex when you're older, you've got some experience, so you can really get in there and get them to do some stuff.
It's funny because the former Zack Ryder, Matt Cardona, has recently debuted on AEW, and he is action figure mad. And Jim Ross is on commentary yes, Matt Cardona, he is one of the foremost world experts on action figures.
He has a YouTube show about action figures and specifically wrestling action figures and so on. He's the kind of guy who can tell you every edition of everybody that put it out, what the card that they were printed on was. He has them graded.
My old roommate was somebody who made action figures and would take custom orders and stuff.
Cool.
and make them online, he would sell them online, but yeah, he had access to molds creation somehow and all this stuff. It was he made action figures and skateboards and was in his 30s. But that's, once again, not in a judgmental way, just in a way that was unexpected.
Now, my dear friend Sean also does custom figures. I've been asking him to make one of me for a long time. Maybe he'll get around to it. As a little kid, it was one of my great dreams to have an action figure of myself. And I don't know if it will ever be realized, but we'll see. When I was in karate, I imagined there being action figures of me and my fellow karate students. It's weird how important things in your own world seem to you when you're a little kid.
Oh, hell yeah.
In some ways, that's much better.
Yeah.
Do we have any additional business?
Just that, some of the storylines we talked about with Carrie Lynn, Colt Cabana in the Dark Order, the FTW title. I don't know. A lot of these stories just really haven't picked up steam over the weeks of AEW. And this is a problem that I'm starting to notice. They'll have a really good idea and they just don't know how to build it properly. Not like WWE knows how to build their ideas properly either, but AEW hasn't quite figured it out either. They seem to kind of forget about things. One problem we kind of got into in the episode with Carrie Lynn that's related to this is that they have this very big tent approach, and it's very reactive to the immediate reactions of the fans. So, they're constantly shifting gears and they're constantly trying to do different things to pick up on, viral movements and things like that. And I think their stories lack a bit of cohesiveness because of that.
Yeah, they do pretty well by their world title scene, but everything you said, Ben, is it infects the rest of it. I'm glad they're trying to do something with everybody, but they actually have to do it. They can't just let it all hang. The Colt Cabana Dark Order story, like, I get it. It's a cool idea and all that. But yeah, it hasn't really progressed in like a month now. They mention it every week. You know, it's there. But is something going to happen? I don't know. I could also think maybe they could just do everything a lot slower and we'll all get used to it. But that requires them to really have a tight grip on their stories and follow up on everything. Slow-paced storytelling can work. New Japan's been doing it for years to bigger and bigger business. And WWF in the 80s did slow burn storytelling to some of the biggest business they ever did, hiding the fact that a lot of the wrestling wasn't very good. And AEW has tremendous wrestling, so we'll see if they can do it, but they gotta tighten it up. Being reactionary doesn't work because there's always going to be people that don't like it no matter what you're doing. And if you're too sensitive obviously, if everybody hates what you're doing, maybe adjust it. But if you're going to be too reactionary, you're never going to tell a cohesive story. Like, because then everyone is writing the story. How many of your favorite books were written by 15, 20, or 30 people? How many of them were written by 30,000 people on Twitter?
The Marvel Universe.
It's a large series of interconnected books. But I understand what you're saying.
But yes, I understand what you're saying as well, Doc.
Yeah, no, comic book fans don't tell the writers what they want to hear, right? No?
Oh, no.
Yeah, that never happens.
Not
right,
the most critical fan base that there is.
Right. Well, maybe it's a bad example, but I think my point stands.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, too many cooks can definitely be a problem.
Too many
That was
cooks.
the problem with WCW.
Too many cooks.
And like AEW is still very much the indies on TV, you know?
I mean, that's kind of what I like about it, even with the sloppiness. But if they're going to do that, they need to go further in that direction. They have to commit to something and try it. I also know that like a lot of the fact that it's going like this is because of the crisis around the world and the fact that they're stuck in like this place and getting people in and out is a chore, et cetera, et cetera.
But anyway, I'm looking forward to the Moxley MJF match on September 5th at All Out. And I'm looking forward to the direction as it goes. I really hope that we get Orange Cassidy versus MJF in the main event before long.
I guess I'm going to watch SummerSlam this weekend.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, we got to watch. Asuka has 2 matches.
Right. Asuka is going to have a title match against Sasha Banks and a title match against Bayley.
By the way,
so that's cool.
We don't really have time to go into all of this, but I watched all of SmackDown last week, and it was fucking awesome.
It got some good reviews.
The whole thing was great. Even the Bray Wyatt, Braun Strowman thing was really interesting. They're doing some interesting kinds of storytelling that takes advantage of the fact that they don't have a real crowd there. So, like, they don't really have to have clear faces and heels. Anyway, there's some promise there. Raw, still garbage from everything I've heard.
I'm definitely interested to see their new arena setup. They have described it as the Thunderdome, which, you know, there's already a Thunderdome, guys. But this is interesting. So they're moving into an arena in Orlando for all of their future tapings now, so that they're not just doing it all at the Performance Center. They're still going to do NXT at the Performance Center. This arena isn't going to have fans, but they're going to have virtual fans, as I understand it, like some pro sports are doing. You can sign up on WWE.com to get, like, to be a fan in the audience with a camera on you, and it's official. People are putting out like the rules and regulations you get, like you can't wear any logos that aren't ours, you can't like make a motion indicating you're smoking something or obscene gestures, or like you can't have more than one person on your camera. Like they're really trying to do that, but they're not going to be on screen all the time. They're bringing in video walls for the ceiling and all the walls so they can make it a 360 degree kind of experience to go well on television. I'm sure it's going to be a novelty that wears off quickly, but I'm interested to see how it looks for some of their big acts.
Do you think they'd let you do the suck it motion?
I don't know. That's a good... They own the trademark on it, so it's up to them.
That starts on SmackDown this Friday, right? And then...
Yes.
I think they wanted to try it out on one show before they did SummerSlam.
Right. That makes sense. And then next weekend is Backlash.
Right.
Which is something they can only do when they're not trying to sell tickets. Not even not trying to sell tickets. They're not trying to sell pay-per-views. Yeah. They don't have to pop the end. Now it's network specials, right? So they're going to have a big show on Sunday and then another big show the next Sunday to clean up the mess of what's inevitably going to happen at SummerSlam.
And to compete with All Out, right? That's going to be the same
right,
weekend.
and to compete with All Out. Yeah.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
This has been Contesting Wrestling. Get ready on Monday. Get ready for Monday when we will be embarking on another multi-part journey.
We'll be headed to the 619. Well, not quite the 619 yet.
We're going to be beheaded?
We are going to be beheaded somewhere in the greater Los Angeles area.
Is a mindless self-indulgent song called Born to Be Beheaded, which is a real mouthful.
We're going to start doing our Rey Mysterio series, which is going to be fantastic because he is one of the most beloved figures in the entire history of wrestling and one of the most objectively awesome athletes I've ever seen in any capacity.
Booyaka.
Booyaka.
This has been Contesting Wrestling. Thank you. We love you.